Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Nirav Shah. I'm a Vice President of Products and Solution at Fortinet. I'm responsible for SD-WAN, SASE, and many network firewall related solution, what we call security driven networking. And today, I'm really excited to talk about how the hybrid workforce that we are all going through, working remotely, some of us going back to office, and what kind of challenges we are seeing in the market, how this convergence of networking and security becomes the most important thing as we move forward to provide a consistent security and the better user experience, regardless of where your users are working from. So let's start off talking about the digital innovations. No matter in which industry you are working or you're catering to your customers, there are many business critical trends which are evolving for which you need to change your infrastructure. Some of you have seen the growth of cloud application, IoT devices, the use of 5G and compute. But at the same time, in last 12 to 18 months, working remotely have accelerated how the digital innovations needs to be adapted. But at the same time, the ability for you to provide a better user experience for your users, for cloud application, for IoT devices, and using the connectivity like 5G. While all of this sounds very exciting, what's happening is because of this change in infrastructure, the overall attack surface is also expanding. The hackers are taking an advantage of it. We have seen in 1 minute over 5 million plus attacks that we are stopping. So the balance between the digital innovation and providing a good security, a solid security, is the foundation principle as we move forward 2021 and beyond. And I want to talk about the few innovations, few survey points that we saw in last 2 to 3 months. I talked about multi-cloud adoption. Over 93% of customers like yourself have already started a multi-cloud strategy. But more importantly, this work from anywhere. I talked about hybrid workforce. IDC just reported that over 72% of customers will remain hybrid workforce. So the way your hybrid workforce are going to access this multi-cloud application is going to be extremely important. But also, as you can see here, over 70% of customers are saying that their users are not getting the user experience they need, and that is hampering their productivity. So as you can see, all the digital innovation, the changes in the infrastructure, the need for a multi-cloud adoption, that all sound good. But if there is a lack of security, if there is a lack of user experience, then your users, your customers are not getting the services that what is required to be productive, to be successful. And I'm sure you must be thinking, why is that happening, right? Now, let's take a step back and think about the legacy network architect. What I'm showing you here is something many of us have deployed, used over last 2 decades. And of course, there is a reason that your on-network branch, your edges are always connected to the data center. And then you're sending your traffic out to the public cloud, private cloud, SaaS application. This has worked well because of that spoke to hub architecture, making sure security inspection is done at the data center. But now, as you saw in last two slides, applications are not in data center. Many of your applications are actually in cloud or in a SaaS applications. So the shift of how they're accessing application becomes extremely important, and this architecture is not efficient. At the same time, remote users, right, working from anywhere that all of us are experiencing, we cannot have users using VPN, going to the data center, and then accessing application. In fact, we have seen many of the users have seen issues with that because of the user experience, and they oftentimes go directly out to the SaaS application, which in fact put even higher risk of a security posture. So three things. This architecture is not giving you this consistent security. It is creating the security gaps for the mobile workforce, and that user experience issue remains there. Another reason why this change of digital innovation, working from anywhere, require a shift to how your edges are deployed, how you need to use a platform approach rather than a point product, and make sure there's a consistent policy, there's a consistent security. Let's talk about the explosion of edges, right? I touched upon how the legacy architecture is changing. This is an example of that. In the past, it was all about network edges and day consuming application in the data center. Today, it's all about users. It's all about the devices that users are using and applications that users are consuming. And as you see this kind of architecture shift, the network edges are everywhere. Yes, branch and campus were the dominant edges that we have seen in last 10 years. But now working from anywhere means there is a branch of one user almost everywhere. This is in a home edge or a coffee shop edge, or some of the users are traveling and still working. So the way users are going through network edges and accessing those different applications I'm showing on the right side needs a complete different transformation. Today, what we have seen is in these different network edges, they have different vendors, different point product. The management has a different console. Inconsistent policy, inconsistent security is creating a lot of complexity. It is increasing a cost for you to manage, and still your users are not getting that experience. This is where, again, this explosion of edges is important, but providing that consistent security, user experience, and keeping users at the focal point is the most important thing that we need to think as we shift our architecture. And as all of us have seen, while we talk about edges, while we talk about users, the speed of cyber threats, how hackers have made a more complex and sophisticated technologies to increase attack has continuously increasing. As you can see from my screen side, from the left side, I'm showing a SolarWinds attack that many of us are aware of. But as you go from left to right, from the delivery, how the attacks are installed, and then the command and control management of those, these attacks are becoming more deeper and more sophisticated. It's important for a technology that is securing your edge is also to provide a much faster resolution and detect those threats so that we can provide this better security, but also stop the lateral movement of threats. This is why it's not just about the speed your users are connecting to application, it's also about the speed, how we can make sure to stop the threats, the hacks that, as I mentioned, at Fortinet using the FortiGuard Labs, we have seen in 1 minute over 5 million plus web attacks that we are stopping. What this all leads to is we cannot have the point products at different edges. There needs to be a comprehensive cybersecurity platform. And that evolution of platform is actually happening for last many years. But let's talk about what we have seen. If you take the last 20 years of time span, starting 2000 to 2010, we have seen the firewall and antivirus was the main focus. And then we saw the next 10 years how firewall shifted to a content inspection, next generation firewall, or a UTM. And then antivirus shifted more towards endpoint protection, right? Applications to the data center connectivity. This has worked well, right? Shift from an IP to more of an application level. But then we again saw in the next 10 years, the shift from data center to cloud, shift from a content inspection to a much more sophisticated edge-based cloud-based security, and then endpoint protection to endpoint detection and zero trust network access. But today, most of the customers we talk to are not just looking for this point products on the left side, they're looking for a platform which has all of this attack surface covered. It has the most sophisticated enterprise certified security threat intelligence and has an identity of users to provide an explicit access. This is where the platform is the most important way for you to shift that architecture. And what we recommend is as you go towards the platform strategy, you need to have three pillars of your security posture. Oftentimes we hear that your networking and security team are working in a silo. This is a great opportunity for you to bring the networking and security team together, converge them while we are also converging the technology. Have the security driven networking approach, whether it's an SD-WAN, whether it's an SD branch, all of those solutions needs to be security driven. And then going to the zero trust access. Make sure what is on your network. Are you getting the visibility? Are you able to control what users are accessing which applications, right? And having that user-based explicit access approach makes it easier for you to provide the security for users and the experience. And of course, the third is adaptive cloud security. Yes, your applications are moving to cloud. Yes, it's important for you to provide a consistent, more granular application, but at the same time, securing the workload, securing the application, providing the compliance is equally important. So these three pillars is what you can apply and make your strategy towards security-driven networking to zero trust access to adaptive cloud security. And again, as you're doing this three different pillars and having an enterprise-grade threat intelligence, what makes it easier for you to stop that most sophisticated threats? Building a threat intelligence is not easy, right? We need to have an artificial intelligence, machine learnings where we are accessing billions of data and then stopping those millions of threats I talked about. At the same time, you need to have a telemetry. So we're getting this information from a network, from a sandbox, from an endpoint, and have a trusted partnership. We are able to detect and stop those zero-day threats. And then on the right side, we can provide that security updates instantly for users, for edges, and for cloud. So as you can see, it's about the visibility, it's about the innovations of how this threat intelligence is done, and then putting an action on top of it. When you combine this within platform approach, this is where you can see how this architecture shift is giving you the productivity you're looking for, but also a better security. So now let's focus and work and talk about, yes, we talked about this pillar and this whole security fabric as a platform, what we want to do for a security-driven networking, right? Of course, with the time permits, I'm not going to go into all three pillars. We'll focus on a security-driven networking, which is the core component of today's discussion. So the big thing about security-driven networking is, regardless of where your users are working, how do we provide that consistent security and a consistent user experience? So at Fortinet, the vision that we have laid down to provide this convergence is very importantly highlighted in this slide. The first and foremost is we need to provide the performance without any bottleneck, right? Performance should not come in the picture so that you don't have to enable any security functionality. And having a purpose-built processor so that we can do a deep inspection, deep security inspection is very critical. Then this platform needs to have an organic innovation to develop things like SD-WAN, SD-branch. Oftentimes you'll see that these vendors are acquiring companies and stitching them together, which sometimes may not scale. It's important for you to see the innovation, the organic innovations, which is kept with this kind of purpose-built security processor. And then our vision is to make sure when you are using this technology, we are able to provide an artificial intelligence for network operations, where we can do an event correlation, predictive analytics, provide the digital experience monitoring so that you can measure the user experience. And all of this with that certified security we talked about. So now when you apply those principles of security-driven networking again to that shift of edges that we talked about, this is how your architecture will look like. You still have focus on users and endpoint and devices, but between users to your those edges, you have a LAN edge, which is again secure LAN edge or SD branch, where your users are, whether it's a branch of one to working from home to a campus. You're using technologies like SD-WAN, zero trust network access, and then you're going through this one consistent unified policy to access SaaS application, cloud application, and a broad application in the data center. But as you are doing it, you still have that same security that you're using at a campus and a branch, also available in a cloud delivered fashion. So it's very important for you to build a strategy where, yes, you want security everywhere, but it can't be just cloud or just edge. You need to have a consistent security on the edge, on the WAN side, on the LAN side for the segmentation, as well as on the cloud side. And there are very few ways you can do this unless you provide the consistent security with this enterprise grade trusted certification that I talked about. Let's talk about also that shift to the cloud delivered security, right? I mentioned that security needs to be everywhere. We are all well aware of an edge security, segmentation. But one of the another important trend that we are seeing is this term called Secure Access Services Edge, or SASE. You might have seen this. Gartner coined this term back in 2019 to again put the focus back on users and make it easier for you to do a security inspection, move from your CapEx to OpEx, and then go to the SaaS application for a simple access. So at Fortinet, we developed this most comprehensive secure access services edge platform where all security and networking is available as a service delivered from cloud. So now your users who continue to work remotely can directly go out to the internet access, but we will provide a full security inspection using next generation firewall, secure web gateway, to make sure we are able to stop the threats before they access SaaS application. We'll give other flexibility like, yes, on the edges, you want to reduce the point product. You just wanted a 5G connectivity with SD-WAN and then go and connect to those security as a service. Absolutely, you can do that. And the third thing that we talked about, you wanted an SD-WAN to connect outbound. SD-WAN is a modern technology which provides you that application steering. Security is done at the cloud, but you also need to protect your segmentation, your LAN side, where we can also enable that same security on the edge. So as you can see, the three key things you can take away is you'll get your digital experience monitoring with that, the digital experiencing with the AI ops and all those technologies to consistently measure the user experience, the security we talked about, and most flexible edge access to make sure no matter where your users are, they are getting always on threat protection. This is really, as you can see, bringing networking and security together, but giving you a flexibility of how you're consuming security and how you're connecting to those secure cloud. So we talked about security-driven networking. We talk about the whole SASE concept. One of the core elements of SASE is also zero trust network access. I told you that it's about how we're making sure that users are the focal point. right? The users are everywhere. In the past, what has happened is once users are connected via VPN to your office, they have always full access and implicit access to all application, all workload. This needs to change. This is where the zero trust network access allow your users to provide an explicit trust for a particular application or a particular session. And that's exactly what I'm showing here. We have an access proxy available on edge, in cloud, everywhere you want it, to make sure these users, before the access application, you have a policy in place. And it has an authentication, it has all kind of control in place to provide that further security on the user and device level. But now with that, you can now simply say that a user working suddenly from Singapore, he's in HR, but trying to access a finance application, they cannot do that, right? He needs to have an application access to his role, and that mandate is done as part of an access proxy. We also take a look at the location to make sure, is that the right user? And all of this together provides that zero trust network access for your users to the right application. So we talked about SASE, we talked about the SASE as an architecture and a vision. Let's talk about use cases that you can apply to your network right away. So the first use case is really about that off-network remote users, right? What all of us are experiencing today. The second is slowly as your users are going back to work, how can you think about a shift to architecture and provide a thin network edge where you don't have to manage a lot of point product and security is in the cloud. And third is that zero trust. You can expand from working from home all the way to all your users. Let's focus on off network, right? This on the right side, you can see your off network users with different devices getting connected to SaaS and a cloud application. Once you implement SASE, each of these off-network users, regardless of what device, what operating system they're using, with their agent, they are connected to an always-on threat protection to the SASE, security as a service, and a network as a service. So that means as users can travel or they go anywhere, security is going with them. When they are accessing the business critical application, we are making sure we are inspecting their application and traffic using IPS, application control, sandbox, SSL inspection, right? Even DLP to provide a full protection. And that's where this consistent security for your remote workers and getting the best user experience is a win-win situation for a networking and a security team. The second is protecting thin network edge, right? We talked about, some of you are already thinking that as you are shifting back, as your users are coming back, do you need that full number of point product? Many of you have firewall, SD-WAN, router, maybe some other products as well. Making a thin network edge where you are deliberately making sure that you are reducing those point product. You have products like this modern technology, SD-WAN, 5G, but then you are making that connectivity to SASE, to security as a service, so that security you can offload to a cloud delivered fashion. And this gives you two key benefits. You're shifting your CapEx to OpEx. You have not to worry about security patches and other things. You're always getting the best of breed security. And it's much easier for you to manage this unified policy across the edges to the remote users. This is where, again, you get that always on threat protection. So now, as we summarize all of this great discussion, we want to go back to SASE. Requirements are great for the work from anywhere, but it needs to have three key principles. SASE needs to provide a really enterprise-grade certified security. Security can't be compromised. You need to have a really good threat intelligence, a consistent security, so that as you shift from an enterprise edges slowly to all cloud, you have the consistent security available everywhere. Second, it needs to be part of the bigger platform. We talked about security fabric platform. It can't be just looking at from one point product. It has to see from your endpoint to the users, to the endpoint edges, and all to the cloud application. And it needs to be highly scalable, have those elasticity as we talked about to provide that user experience. And third, for that successful working from anywhere for hybrid workforce, it needs to provide an excellent user experience. So productivity does not become an issue. And for that, you need to have a technologies like SD-WAN organically developed and working to provide that security first approach. Yes, we talked about the platform and SASE, but one of the core component of platform is to also have an open ecosystem, right? We realize that many of you have invested in many vendors, and the platform needs to have an open ecosystem so that we provide deeper integration. And this is an example of Fortinet's platform with 400 plus integrations that we provide today in a security fabric platform, right? The fabric connectors, which has deeper integration to the cloud and many other ServiceNow specific tools. You see the fabric APIs where we provide another level of integration. There's a DevOps specific integration and an extended ecosystem so that your existing investment is well integrated with the platform to make it easier and provide that consistent policy. So now that we learned all of this great thing, let's summarize that if you need to apply SASE, you need to apply this shift to the architecture, what can you do immediately, right? I recommend that next week, you should now think about a cross-functional team having a security, networking, workflows, and a branch transformation together. So to remove these silos that sometimes we hear, and you have one cohesive team thinking about this SASE-based architecture. In the first 3 months, you can develop a SASE strategy. Again, SASE is a framework, it's an architecture. It will take time. But as you can develop an adoption timeline and measurable goals, it will be easier for you to go towards that thin edge and the consistent security, some at edge, some on the cloud delivered for that good security posture that we talked about. You should evaluate the legacy VPN to the zero trust network access so that you can go from an implicit to an explicit trust per application for all your users. And as you go 12 months plus, you definitely want to think about SD-WAN and this cloud delivered security from one vendor. There are very few, but handful of vendors like Fortinet who has a vision to provide that, or you can have two vendors to have an SD-WAN and security. But it gives you a consolidation, a simple way to manage your networking and security everywhere. But while you do that, you need to think about how do you measure your end-to-end experience from edge to cloud. So hopefully this gives you an idea of how you can apply to your architecture what we talked about today. Of course, to learn more about us, Fortinet, we are a leading cybersecurity company. We talked about the security fabric as a platform. Big innovations is in the DNA to provide those new technologies we talked about. And of course, it's all about to partner with you now and in future for those innovations to provide the best working from anywhere experience while providing us great security protection. So I hope this was helpful. Thank you so much for your time. Bye-bye.